Hello and welcome. I'm Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all the UFO, UAP news from everywhere and anywhere. So I'm sure by now, most of you are aware that the UAP Disclosure Amendment failed to be passed for the second year in a row. Christopher Sharp from the Liberation Times wrote an article about it called "The Paradigm Changing UFO Transparency Legislation Fails in Congress for a Second Consecutive Year." An unprecedented Senate amendment aimed at increasing transparency on unidentified anomalous phenomenon, or UAP, introduced by U.S. Senators Mike Rounds and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, has been excluded from the Senate's National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2025. If passed, the UAPDA could have unleashed a process revealing that the U.S. government and defense contractors possess retrieved crafts, which are, according to the Act, capable of transmedium travel, instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic speeds, and positive lift. I thought this part of the article was very, very revealing. The Liberation Times has learned that the CIA, currently facing mounting criticism over alleged dishonesty regarding anomalous health incidents. I guess a number of people involved in the retrieval of these craft have gotten radiation poisoning, along with the Department of Defense and Department of Energy, has consistently bypassed democratic oversight in retrieving advanced objects of unknown origin. According to the Liberation Times sources, these materials are subsequently sent to national labs and select defense contractors, including Lockheed Martin. Multiple programs are understood to be orchestrated by the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology and its Directorate of Operations alongside Department of Defense components. Okay, this is very revealing also. The Liberation Times has uncovered details of an alleged program focused on retrieving advanced crafts from beneath the sea, some reportedly of non-human or unknown origin. This alleged program draws on multiple agencies and departments, specialized assets, and expertise to carry out these missions. Once recovered, these crafts are allegedly transferred to the Office of Naval Research, which subsequently hands them over to defense contractors for detailed analysis. So according to this article, the UAPDA failed to be included in the overall defense package due to resistance from the committee's Republican ranking member, Senator Rand Paul. And the Liberation Times, it says here, requested comment from Senator Paul's office. I'm not sure whether they got it or not, but in 2021, Senator Paul implied that $22 million secured by the late Senator Harry Reid for a UAP program was a bad use of government money. So his resistance to the UAP Act goes back to 2021. So this marks the second successive failure for the UAPDA, which was gutted by the NDAA-FY 2024 due to the opposition from multiple fronts, most notably Representative Mike Turner and other leaders within the House. On a positive note, this article does point out that despite repeated failures to pass the UAPDA, new UAP hearings are expected in the coming months within both the Senate and the House. Furthermore, there is a potentially brighter future for AARO, or the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, under the leadership of its new director, Dr. John T. Kozlowski. The new move potentially provides the AARO with another opportunity to rigorously investigate allegations of retrieval and reverse engineering programs relating to materials and biologics of potential non-human intelligence. So the fight within the U.S. government for UAP transparency continues. So even though the amendment wasn't passed as legislation this year again for the second year. The fight continues, and there are other things going on. Just wanted to go over a few things, sort of give an update as to what's going on in terms of UAP disclosure. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand confirmed that the U.S. Senate will hold a UAP hearing in November. The hearing will be hosted by the Armed Services Committee. And she had previously suggested this hearing would provide an opportunity for the new head of AARO to provide additional context on the historical review report and to elaborate on the results of the ongoing completed UAP case analysis. And as stated before, the UAPDA failed to make it into the manager's package for the FY25 NDAA, which is the defense package that comes up for legislation every year. According to the latest publicly available legislative package put forth, the 2024 UAP Disclosure Act will not be included then or considered for inclusion in the National Defense Authorization Act. On a positive note, Representative Nancy Mace will chair the second public UAP hearing on November the 13th in the U.S. House. Speaking to Ascapol, Representative Mace confirmed the follow-up to last year's UAP hearing in the U.S. House is scheduled for November the 13th. And top-ranking Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee shared his thoughts on upcoming UAP hearings. In a conversation with Joe Cahill, Senator Wicker commented on the upcoming UAP-related hearing in the U.S. Senate. He said, and I quote, "The UAP issue is not going away. I don't think we should be afraid of hearing from experts and trying to winnow the myths from the reality," end quote. And according to Senator Gillibrand, a public hearing in line with AARO's latest report can be expected soon. This has more recently been confirmed to be happening in November, though. So speaking with Ascapol, Representatives Luna and Burchett indicated that the next UAP hearing has been penciled in for November the 13th. So everything seems to be coming to a head in November, folks. And Representatives Moskowitz, Luna, and Burchett have repeatedly stated their intent to hold field hearings to overcome stonewalling from the Pentagon and military establishment. Representative Luna confirmed, and I quote, "I feel confident that we have enough evidence to move forward with our first field hearing. We will be announcing details soon." Okay, looking forward to that. And several journalists have indicated that firsthand witnesses of the alleged UAP legacy programs are in the process of providing testimony and evidence to the relevant authorities and or on the verge of making public statements in the near future. Excellent. More whistleblowers coming forward. And lastly, this post says that David Grush has received additional clearance through DOPSR to discuss some of his alleged firsthand knowledge of legacy programs. He has mentioned he may be covering more of the information in an upcoming op-ed. And I got this all from r/UFOB, Disclosure Diaries. And I just wanted to cover those updates because it's very discouraging when the UAP legislation fails to be passed 2 years in a row. But there's still stuff going on. We're all still very hopeful because during this tumultuous time where there's war brewing around the globe, we all need some sort of positive news. I'd like to play a video that shows that sentiment exactly. And this was posted by r/aliens New Paradigm Institute. So it's from the New Paradigm Institute, which is run by Dan Sheehan, a civil rights lawyer who's really been pushing for UAP disclosure within Washington.
Let's face it, in the midst of endless scrolling and negative news overload, UFO UAP disclosure is exactly what we need to shake things up. The news cycle is an endless feat of chaos. And while it's all important, sometimes we've got to hit pause and zoom out. When we're drowning in crisis after crisis and social polarization has us feeling more divided than ever, we need a larger story. Imagine revealing a truth so profound that it could unite us all. High-level insiders have dropped major revelations about non-human intelligence and world-changing technologies.
Non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity.
Breakthroughs in technology from studying recovered UFO, UAP materials could radically improve our lives and transform society, benefiting humanity and our planet. The UFO, UAP movement is no longer on the fringe and has captivated mainstream attention like never before. Dedicated lawyers, government insiders, activists, and everyday citizens are driving the conversation forward and shifting the paradigm. The deeper questions raised by the disclosure movement are already beginning to heal political divisions.
I am not apologizing.
Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are overcoming bitter partisan disagreements and calling for disclosure. What they're after and what we all seek is simply the truth. While the UFO UAP community has its divisions, we share a common goal: pushing disclosure forward to uncover what's really going on. We have a right to know the truth about UFOs. Together, we can end the secrecy. Visit newparadigminstitute.org and join the UFO UAP disclosure movement.
Amen to that. I think that UAP disclosure would unite us as a planet. And if you guys want to learn more about the Paradigm Institute, go to the New Paradigm Institute, and you can actually sign up, and they'll send a letter in your name to your representative stating that you want more transparency on the UAP issue. So I'd like to switch gears now. And if you guys recall last year, the Chinese balloon incident that was captivating all our attention. Recently, a picture came out of the object that was shot down over the Yukon in Canada. This is a very short article by Daniel Otis, and it's entitled Image Released of Mysterious Object Shot Down Over Yukon in 2023. And it has a short news clip that's attached to it. I'm going to play that.
We can now show you an exclusive image of that unidentified object shot down over Yukon last year. So here it is. That's the image. This grainy picture comes from an email printout obtained by CTV News. This object was shot down by a U.S. fighter jet last February when concerns over suspected spy balloons from China, everyone was talking about it around the world, made international headlines. So this image was actually cleared to be made public shortly after the object was shot down, but then it was held back. Why? The Department of National Defense thought it may cause more confusion. What is it?
Okay, so that picture was released through a Canadian Freedom of Information request. It is a grainy image, but it is an actual email printout of the object. It's interesting, though, that the United States didn't have any news outlet that requested a FOIA of that picture. So I guess the reason why it was held back was because, well, the official excuse given was that it may create more questions or confusion. And back then, about a year and a half ago, we were all wondering what NORAD shot down back in February the 11th of 2023. It was shot down over Canadian airspace in the Yukon Territory, and that borders Alaska. It was actually one of 3 unidentified aerial objects that were blasted out of the sky that month. And that happened following a high-profile February the 4th, 2023 downing of an apparent Chinese surveillance balloon. Now, this was shot down over Alaska, Yukon, and Lake Huron between the 10th and the 12th of February. The 3 objects were reportedly much smaller than the towering Chinese balloon. And this was released as part of a Freedom of Information request package, as I said. An email from a Canadian Brigadier General offered what they described as, quote, the best description that we have of the Yukon object. In an email, quote, top quarter is metallic, remainder white, 20-foot wire hanging below with a package of some sort suspended from it. So the image of the Yukon object was distributed internally February the 14th of 2023. The next morning, it was declared unclassified and approved for public release. But despite a flurry of emails to clear the image for public release, the Department of National Defense's acting Assistant Deputy Minister for Public Affairs soon poured cold water on the idea. So the Department of National Defense's acting Assistant Deputy Minister is quoted as saying, quote, given the current public environment and statements related to the object being benign, releasing the image may create more questions or confusion, regardless of the text that will accompany the post. And the photo was never released as a result of that. And if you guys recall back then, the inability to find and expose what these objects were the harsh winter conditions and remote mountainous terrain. So efforts to recover debris from the Yukon object were called off. Searches were also halted for the object shot down above Alaska and Lake Huron. President Biden said that the three objects likely posed no threat and were probably private or research balloons. A lack of details and imagery has created, though, an air of mystery around the incidents when compared with the well-documented Chinese balloon. But in my opinion, this ultimately just illustrates a failure by the US and Canada to accurately identify objects in their airspace. And I think that's why there was so much secrecy. And this article says that it comes down to these episodes illustrating a potential vulnerability in the US-Canada defense system. Certainly, the failure to provide more information has fed conspiracy theories. Heck yeah. But the military will likely accept the outcome over disclosing information that may help an adversary identify defense weaknesses. Okay, so they didn't want to expose any weaknesses in their air defense systems. I guess that's understandable. And by the way, in Canada, the Office of the Chief Science Advisor's Sky Canada project plans to release its own official UAP report this year. Here's another image of that object that was shot down over the Yukon. And here's one of the Air Force F-22 Raptors that shot it down. So as I said, it was this image of the object shot down over the Yukon over a year and a half ago has been all over social media. Here's a post on Reddit by r/UFOB, a pensive monkey. And the heading reads, UFO shot down over the Yukon shows similarities to one filmed in Busan, South Korea in 2012. Okay, it does look very similar. Now, forgive me for being crass, but to me, it looks like a toilet seat. Sorry. Let's look at some of the comments here to that post. And we have, I've captured a similar object twice over my house recently in Denver, and that is pretty much the same object. This is another picture that Chasen Wabbits took, and the caption reads, this is taken the same day as the picture I posted earlier in June. I used a Nikon P1000 and was almost all the way zoomed in, so the object had to be about 5 miles away. A triangular object kept appearing and disappearing around the object, which led me to believe it's not a balloon. I was just thinking it could be a balloon, but he's saying here that it's not because he saw some triangular object appearing and disappearing nearby. So it's not the first time this object has been seen by the public. I'd like to do a little review of the history of these Chinese balloons and the Chinese balloon incident, or what's being called the Chinese balloon incident, which started February the 4th of 2023. And this is an article from the online magazine UFO Insight by the very prolific Marcus Loth. I've interviewed him twice on UFO Disclosure. He's very knowledgeable, and he did an excellent job covering the Chinese balloon incident from 2023. And he includes some video in this. So I want to thank Marcus Loth, give him all the credit for this excellent article and review. The article is entitled The 2023, quote, Downed UFO, end quote, Wave over North America. Just what is going on? On February the 4th, 2023, a decision was made to bring down a Chinese weather balloon that had, according to the Chinese authorities, had strayed off course. The incident, as we might imagine, made international news with the usual rhetoric and flexing of muscles on the global stage taking place in the days that followed. The incident might have died down somewhat if it hadn't been for the sudden appearance of several other strange objects over a several-day period, each of which was also shot down by the United States fighter jets, but which were seemingly decidedly different from the weather balloon a little over a week previously. All of a sudden, typical headlines such as, quote, U.S. shoots down unknown object, end quote, were being displayed regularly across mainstream news channels across the world. That's all you could find, folks, back then. I remember it was all over the news, constantly. Going on with Marcus Loth's article, indeed, while explanations as to what these mysterious objects are will undoubtedly be forthcoming. However, what is perhaps important for UFO researchers and investigators to note as the events have unfolded, and indeed continue to do so, is the language used by the official military and government spokespeople, as while it might prove to be that these objects were some kind of advanced spying device, albeit a terrestrial one, should objects that do prove to be extraterrestrial in nature ever appear in our skies in the future, we will have a reference point for how governments around the world might react. And that's true. That was a good test as to how the government might react if we ever did have a real UAP come into our airspace. Okay, so the next heading is what happened, when, and why. And this is pretty much a timeline. And he's going to go back to January the 28th, the balloon that garnered attention around the world, not least from the Pentagon, entered United States airspace over Alaska. The object was then reported by passengers from an airplane on February the 1st, before further reports were made from residents in Montana. One of these who witnessed the object was Chase Doak, who first spotted the aerial anomaly from the window of his home in Billings while getting ready to leave for work. And I guess this is a picture that he took. What made Doak pay close attention to the object was that only moments earlier, he had listened to a piece on the news about, quote, airspace restrictions, end quote, over the area, as well as the mobilization of F-22 fighter jets. To begin with, he believed it was a UFO, but later news statements confirmed that it was a Chinese weather balloon. And what perhaps made the military take more urgent note of the object as it made its way over Montana is that the state is home to Malmstrom Air Force Base, which houses nuclear missiles. However, it was soon spotted over Missouri and eventually brought down just off the coast of Surfside Beach in South Carolina. It was recovered almost immediately, and its origin was confirmed. There was more activity in the days that followed. There was another object brought down off the coast of Alaska on February the 10th. So while back and forth statements were issued between the United States and China, beginning February the 10th, 3 more objects appeared over the North American continent. These, however, were unidentified, and that was the official stance. On February the 10th, an unidentified object was spotted just off the coast of Dead Horse in Alaska. Flying at an altitude of around 40,000 feet, it was determined that the object could be a danger to commercial and military aircraft, as well as with the Chinese weather balloon incident still fresh in mind, a potential surveillance device, which was what the government was pushing all along, that it was a Chinese surveillance device. They were spying on us. Moving on with the article, a short time later, the military scrambled fighter jets with orders to shoot down the anomaly, which they duly did. This time, however, authorities claimed that the object was much smaller than the weather balloon the previous week, around the size of a small car, and was most likely not a weather balloon at all. Now, there's a short video here that features a news report on the incident. And all along, I was wondering, why send an F-22 with missiles that are so expensive to shoot down a weather balloon? Each one of those missiles is comparatively the price of the average American home. To me, that was overkill. So let's check out the short video here on the news report of the object shot down over Dead Horse, Alaska.
We have no further details about the object at this time, including any description of its capabilities, purpose, or origin.
President Joe Biden is calling it a success after the U.S. shot down a high-altitude object off the coast of Alaska on Friday. Many questions remain, but the object has been described as being about the size of a small car and was first detected Thursday. It was assessed to be unmanned, and the Pentagon press secretary said it posed a reasonable threat to civilian air traffic as it was flying at 40,000 feet.
Could be a drone, could be a balloon, could be any number of objects. We simply do not know, and the forensics will reveal all of this.
Another big unanswered question is where the object came from. Recovery efforts are underway to retrieve what's left.
It would appear, though, that just from its size, that it didn't represent the technology that apparently was represented on the Chinese balloon.
This comes nearly a week after U.S. fighter jets downed a suspected Chinese surveillance balloon off the coast of South Carolina. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard are still working to recover that debris.
USS Carter Hall remains in the vicinity of the debris field and is leading the recovery efforts.
For now, the U.S. is not indicating a connection between the unidentified object and the Chinese balloon. I'm Gloria Pasmino reporting.
Okay, so the article goes on with a new heading, quote, small cylindrical object, end quote, tracked and targeted over the Yukon, February the 11th. So the following day, on February the 11th, a small cylindrical object was tracked in Canada in their airspace and was eventually fired on by another F-22 fighter jet over the Yukon territory. In an official statement on his Twitter account, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stated that he had ordered the takedown of an unidentified object after speaking with President Biden. Once more, the object was described as being smaller than the weather balloon, with no solid explanation available for what it might have been. Following the shooting down of the object, a recovery operation was put into action, an operation that both Trudeau and Biden agreed was particularly important, quote, to determine more details on its purpose or origin, end quote. So that just created more mystery and created more conspiracy theories over what was going on. Here's another video provided by Marcus Loth, a short news report on the object over Canada.
Update now. The U.S. military has shut down another unidentified object today over northern Canada. It took place over the Yukon through NORAD, which is a joint U.S. and Canadian military command. U.S. officials still say they do not know who owns the object that was shot down yesterday over Alaska. ABC's M. Gwen has more.
The military is now in the process of recovering the wreckage of an unidentified object shot down Friday off the coast of Alaska. The White House saying this object was flying at 40,000 feet, posing a threat to civilian aircraft.
Out of an abundance of caution and at the recommendation of the Pentagon, President Biden ordered the military to down the object. And they did.
One senior official describing it as cylindrical and silverish gray. The Pentagon saying it's about the size of a small car.
Do you have anything to say about the object shot down over Alaska, Mr. President?
The White House says the object was first detected Thursday evening. Fighter jets sent to observe, determining it was unmanned. The president briefed Thursday, giving the order to shoot it down Friday morning. An F-22 fighter jet taking the shot at 1:45 p.m. This object didn't appear to have the gondola underneath it like the suspected Chinese spy balloon that was brought down off the coast of the Carolinas.
There's no indication that it had any capability to be powered or to steer in a particular direction or to collect intelligence.
President Biden has faced some criticism for not acting sooner to shoot down that Chinese spy balloon before it transversed the United States. Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski says Friday's action sends a better message.
Any aspect of U.S. sovereign territory that is encroached upon, there's going to be consequences to it.
On Friday, the military announced they had found the massive technology bay from that Chinese spy balloon at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
Okay, moving on with the article. There was another incident over Lake Huron on February the 12th. Only 24 hours later, yet another almost identical object was brought down as it moved across the sky at approximately 20,000 feet over Lake Huron in Michigan. Once more, the danger of other aircraft was the reason given for taking such action, as well as the apparent flight path of the objects were close to several, quote, sensitive Department of Defense sites, end quote. And once more, a recovery operation was put into immediate effect. And there's a news report included here. This is the on the third downed object.
U.S. officials have confirmed to ABC News that another high-altitude object was shot down Sunday afternoon over Lake Huron. According to one official, it was shot down by a U.S. military aircraft. Today's incident comes one day after another unidentified object was shot down on Saturday, according to officials. This one over the Yukon in Canada. The object first detected Friday night, Canadian and U.S. planes scrambling to scope it out. President Biden speaking to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, giving the green light for a U.S. F-22 fighter jet to take the shot. Trudeau thanking the long-standing partnership that monitors the sky and the sea, North America.
I also spoke with President Biden and confirmed together that we will continue to do everything necessary to protect the sovereignty of our shared North American airspace.
Saturday's incident comes just one day after a U.S. fighter jet shot down a similar object over Alaska. The military and FBI are now working to recover that object. It also comes on the heels of the U.S. shooting down a suspected Chinese spy balloon off the coast of South Carolina on February 4th after it transversed the United States.
Shooting the balloon down in the Atlantic once it flew over all the military bases, including my own Fort Campbell, Kentucky, it's very disturbing. I'm glad this administration's taken it more seriously with respect to the balloons, but we've got a whole lot bigger problem with China than the spy balloon.
But Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer defended the Biden administration's handling of the situation.
We're going to probably be able to piece together this whole surveillance balloon and know exactly what's going on. So that's a huge coup for the United States.
Schumer says the U.S. gained intelligence information from surveilling that balloon. Elwin Lopez, ABC News, Atlanta.
Going to move on with the article. And the next heading is, quote, "We're calling them objects for a reason," exclamation point, and end quote. In a question and answer session with the media regarding the events over North America and multiple unknown objects that had been shot down, General Glenn Van Herk, a senior commander of U.S. Northern Command and the North American Aerospace Defense Command, in answer to whether the objects could have been the result of aliens, he stated quite bluntly that he, quote, hasn't ruled anything out, end quote. And that's pretty significant for somebody of that caliber in the military to say something like that, that he hasn't ruled out aliens as being the source of those objects that were shot down. He would continue that his department would, quote, continue to assess every threat or potential threat unknown, end quote, in order to defend American airspace. So they considered this obviously a national security threat. And while it is perhaps not something to leap on with too much authority, the fact that the official line is that everything is on the table and nothing, including the possibility that these objects could, however unlikely, be extraterrestrial of origin, is an important one. And I agree with Marcus Loos. That's a very important point, that they're actually not ruling that out, which insinuates that they believe that extraterrestrials are real. As is the admission that authorities were unable to, quote, categorize how they stay afloat, end quote, and the straightforward comment that authorities were, quote, calling them objects for a reason, end quote. Okay, so I guess they didn't want to be too clear as to what kind of objects they were. Going on with the article, according to sources with the New York Times, although private reassurances have been made that these objects are unlikely to be of extraterrestrial origin, there is a growing realization behind closed doors that the longer this goes on without an explanation being offered, the more speculation will continue to grow. That's true. And soon after this, as all of you are aware, David Grush made his appearance, and soon after that, Lou Elizondo made the scene on this whole UAP transparency issue. There's a video below that features General Van Herk speaking, and that's the general that said that he would not rule out extraterrestrials as being the source of these objects.
Developing this morning, folks, it has happened again. The U.S. military shooting down another high-flying object. This time it happened Sunday over Lake Huron. It's a Great Lake between Canada and Michigan. Wake Up Charlotte's Bree Jackson now in Washington with what the Pentagon has said so far.
Ben, the Pentagon is declining to describe these recent objects as balloons, but this is the fourth takedown in just 8 days, and lawmakers on Capitol Hill say they're being left in the dark about the situation. The U.S. military shooting down a fourth unidentified high-altitude object Sunday, this time over Lake Huron.
What's gone on the last, 2 weeks or so, 10 days, has been nothing short of craziness. And the military needs to have a plan to not only determine what's out there, but determine the dangers that go with it.
President Biden ordering the takedown after military officials raised concerns about the object's path and altitude, saying it was a safety flight hazard and a threat due to its potential surveillance capabilities. This marks the third object blasted out of the sky in just 3 days. Boom! And comes a week after a Chinese surveillance balloon had Americans' eyes glued to the sky.
They do appear somewhat trigger happy, although this is certainly preferable to the permissive environment that they showed when the Chinese spy balloon was coming over some of our most sensitive sites.
Military leaders say the Pentagon has been more closely scrutinizing U.S. airspace. Officials are still collecting data to determine what the recent objects are, as bipartisan calls for transparency grow.
Why it's taking so long for number one, for me personally, to identify these objects, too. Why is it taking so long for them to be shot down?
In the absence of information, people's anxiety leads them into potentially destructive areas. So I do hope that very soon the administration has a lot more information for all of us on what's going on.
Lawmakers are pushing for a briefing on the unidentified flying objects. The Pentagon continues to search for debris and answers about their nature and purpose. And defense officials say there was no indication of aliens with these recent takedowns. In Washington, Bree Jackson, Wake Up Charlotte.
Okay, moving on with the article. The next heading reads, "A fast-paced, ever-changing picture." In an official White House media statement on February the 13th, although authorities are still not entirely certain, it was offered that it was likely that the Chinese government were involved in some kind of highly advanced surveillance or reconnaissance program, which these objects were likely a part of. Of course, this could have been happening for some time, as the skies over North America have been watched particularly close over the past week since the weather balloon was first reported and brought down. What's more, from other countries around the world, including the United Kingdom, we are now starting to monitor their airspace that much more closely. Defense Secretary for the United Kingdom, Ben Wallace, stated that, quote, the UK and her allies will review what these airspace intrusions mean for our security, end quote, adding that these incidents were, quote, another sign of how the global picture is changing for the worse, end quote. And I should add that Marcus Loth is from the UK, and I'm sure that's why he mentioned Ben Wallace and what their stance is on their defense of their airspace. Moving on, of course, if China or another nation does indeed prove to be behind the wave of objects in the North American airspace, then the consequences and fallout could be tragic enough. What, though, if there was some kind of extraterrestrial connection, Marcus Loth is posing here? And he says, for example, while it is not certain as to the authenticity of the claims, it appears that an almost exact object has appeared over eastern China. That's interesting. An object that at the time of writing, the Chinese authorities are preparing to also shoot down. So why would they shoot down their own surveillance balloon? So it may not be from China. Then we might have to consider that we, the West and the East, just might be in the same boat together. If it wasn't from China, then we're both being surveyed by an unknown source, which possibly could be extraterrestrial. So Marcus Loth goes on with another heading that says, what if, question mark? While the following clearly is speculation on our part, we might ask what it would mean if these objects were indeed alien aircraft, albeit seemingly without occupants, and perhaps more importantly, what might happen next. Could it really be possible, for example, Marcus Loth says, or writes here, that these objects were of extraterrestrial origin? And if so, what is the purpose of their journeys across the continent of North America? Might we expect further sightings of these strange objects? And might subsequent sightings be of more complex craft, complete with occupants and representatives from the other world? That would be cool. And Marcus Loth goes on to say in the article, while we are speculating, we might question if there was any prior knowledge of these objects arriving, and the planned calm, transparent response is one that has been planned while other events take place behind the scenes, or whether it is genuine. And he has in parentheses here, which is, it has to be said likely. So he's saying that this was just a distraction to keep everybody calm, while possibly a real meeting with extraterrestrials was happening behind the scenes. Never thought of that. Good point, Marcus. Okay, moving on with the article. It is also worth drawing attention to an apparently leaked, and it has to be said, suspicious photograph that has found its way onto the internet, claiming to show the crippled craft shot down over Alaska. You can see that picture below. Never noticed that before on the internet. So this could possibly be the craft that was shot down over Alaska, or part of it anyway, because half of it is probably stuck in the snow. And while it's almost certain that this picture is fake, Marcus Loth says, in quotes, he says, it appears to be from a film, and many people have questioned while footage and images of the weather balloon being shot down were made so readily available, while the subsequent objects have not. Yeah, that caused a lot of suspicion, why the subsequent objects were not shown in the media while the Chinese balloons were. Marcus Loth says that there is certainly more revelations to come. We can be sure of that. The article goes on with another heading, details that resonate almost perfectly. Once more, while it is almost certain that these objects will prove to be of terrestrial nature, we might once more wish to go over the overall descriptions of the three shot down after the weather balloon. Okay. Each was described as being oblong or cylindrical, which we never saw a picture of anything that was oblong or cylindrical. Each was described as being approximately the size of a car, and each was described as having no visible means of propulsion. All of these details are regularly found in UFO sightings from around the world and across the decades. And while that doesn't offer proof that these objects are extraterrestrial vehicles, it is certainly intriguing that all three have surfaced in recent events. If these objects are terrestrial surveillance devices, might they have even been designed based on such details given in UFO sightings? It's a good question, Marcus. He also poses the question, might we even speculate that they could even be the result of reverse-engineered alien technology? While that might sound a little far-fetched to some, we just might find that the truth turns out to be far stranger than fiction or speculation. That's true. As the saying goes, the truth often turns out to be far stranger than fiction. And there's a video below this paragraph of the news reports on the unidentified objects over North America, February 2023. Finish off with that.
One object was taken out today, another yesterday. This brings the total to 4 in the last 8 days. A U.S. military jet brought down the latest one over Lake Huron this afternoon. That lake is on the border between Michigan and Ontario, Canada. F-16s from the Wisconsin Air National Guard shot down the object. The debris landed in Canadian waters, and now U.S. and Canadian crews are working to recover it. Now, another object was shot down over the Yukon in Canada yesterday. That one was first detected Friday night. President Biden worked with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and gave the green light for a U.S. F-22 fighter jet to take that one out. Today, Trudeau thanked the U.S. and NORAD for watching over North America.
I also spoke with President Biden and confirmed together that we will continue to do everything necessary to protect the sovereignty of our shared North American airspace.
A similar object was taken out over Alaska Friday. The military and FBI are working to recover debris there, but it's going to be difficult because it was shot down in a frigid, remote area. Remember, this all began with that Chinese spy balloon that drifted across the country before it was shot down off the coast of South Carolina 8 days ago. The military located some key pieces of the wreckage at the bottom of the Atlantic, and the FBI is now analyzing it. The head of NORAD says part of the reason for these repeated shootdowns is a heightened alert following that first incident. The chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee says that big balloon sent a provocative message to the United States. Congressman Michael McCall, whose district stretches from Austin to Houston, was on Inside Texas Politics this morning, and he talked about how the U.S. jammed the balloon's communications as it crossed the country.
My understanding is we did jam the communications, which is important, right? They can't signal back to the mothership in Beijing. But then what was allowed to operate at the same time? And why wasn't it shot down at the beginning?
McCall says he will hold hearings on China and why these objects have been allowed to enter U.S. airspace. You can see this full interview on WFAA.com. We are hearing a lot about NORAD right now. It is the North American Aerospace Defense Command. What does it do? Well, it is a binational organization operated by the U.S. and Canada. It monitors man-made objects in space like satellites, but it's also responsible for detecting, validating, and warning against attacks by aircraft or missiles. NORAD uses a network of satellites, radar, and fighter jets to detect, intercept, and, if necessary, engage with threats to North America. Clear answers about exactly what is happening and where these objects are coming from are pretty hard to come by right now. We did turn to a Dallas woman who was once in the CIA. She was also an FBI agent specializing in Chinese counterintelligence. She is not concerned about any imminent physical danger in the U.S., but she is uneasy over a slowdown in communication with China.
The first time they were very, regretful. They expressed a lot of regret. And now they've really taken this hardened response of not taking our calls, not taking meetings with us. So I am concerned because one of the things that the CIA that you want to try to do is gauge, what is potentially a hostile nation doing? What is the response going to be? What kind of activity is going on? Is chatter increasing, decreasing, those kinds of things? But right now we're in this very confusing state.
So that was an excellent article by Marcus Loth. And this is a picture of Marcus Loth here. He's a writer with a love for UFOs, aliens, and the ancient astronaut theory. He loves the paranormal, and he has been writing and researching with over 20 years of experience. Marcus has been editor-in-chief for several years due to his excellent knowledge in these fields, and Marcus also regularly appears as an expert on radio talk shows, and he has been on my show twice, ufoinsight.com, if you guys want to check him out. So I'm not sure if all those objects in Marcus Loth's article from last year were all Chinese balloons, but it certainly was a good demonstration of how our military would have reacted if we ever did have real extraterrestrials come into our airspace. And as far as that other object shot down over the Yukon, it took way too long to declassify it and show that picture to the public. It just creates more conspiracy theories. We need more transparency from NORAD, from the United States and the Canadian government. And I know that national security is important, but if it doesn't affect our national security, if it's just a balloon, why keep it from the public? I'd like to play that video from the Paradigm Institute one more time, just to reemphasize the overall need for more openness and transparency when it comes to unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Let's face it, in the midst of endless scrolling and negative news overload, UFO UAP disclosure is exactly what we need to shake things up. The news cycle is an endless feed of chaos. And while it's all important, sometimes we've got to hit pause and zoom out. When we're drowning in crisis after crisis and social polarization has us feeling more divided than ever, we need a larger story. Imagine revealing a truth so profound that it could unite us all. High-level insiders have dropped major revelations about non-human intelligence and world-changing technologies.
Non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity.
Breakthroughs in technology from studying recovered UFO UAP materials could radically improve our lives and transform society, benefiting humanity and our planet. The UFO UAP movement is no longer on the fringe and has captivated mainstream attention like never before. Dedicated lawyers, government insiders, activists, and everyday citizens are driving the conversation forward and shifting the paradigm. The deeper questions raised by the disclosure movement are already beginning to heal political divisions.
I am not apologizing.
Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are overcoming bitter partisan disagreements and calling for disclosure. What they're after and what we all seek is simply the truth. While the UFO UAP community has its divisions, we share a common goal: pushing disclosure forward to uncover what's really going on. We have a right to know the truth about UFOs. Together, we can end the secrecy. Visit newparadigminstitute.org and join the UFO UAP disclosure movement.
I suggest you guys, if you're interested, check them out. We all need more truth, more transparency from the government. That's it for me. My name is Al Barrows. This has been UFO Disclosure. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks. Thanks for listening to my podcast.